Hi, I'm Maggie Burnett Stogner, Executive Director of the Center for Environmental Filmmaking at American University in Washington, D.C. And I am here today with Samuel Rubin, Chief Impact Officer of Yay Impact, based in Los Angeles and very committed to empowering grassroots community organizing, and Camilla Ardila of the Can You Hear Us campaign. This is one of the projects that has been selected by special jury for Jackson Wild 2022. And I have a lot of questions that I'd like to ask you both. So I think we should just dive in. First, let me say congratulations. We had quite a selection this year, and it was very clear that the campaign, the impact campaign that you've put together and have been conducting and expanding over the last several years, inspired by I Am Greta, is really, truly outstanding. Samuel, let me start with you because you've been working on this for 3 years now. What are some of the background and highlights that you can share with us? You know, when did you get started? What inspired this campaign? How did it get launched?
Thank you so much, Maggie, for the kind words. It feels very special to be here today and kind of a full circle moment because actually in this room in Barcelona right now is where I did our Zoom interview with Exposure Labs 3 years ago when they hired Impact to do our the impact campaign. So it feels like a little bit of a nostalgic feeling to be explaining now here all the outcomes in the same virtual meeting place. But Can You Hear Us started in October of 2020, 1 month before the release of I Am Greta. 2020 feels a little bit like a lifetime ago because quite a lot has happened in the last 3 years. But back then, we were contemplating the release of I Am Greta in the middle of a pandemic that we are all now familiar with. And I think back at that time, we all realized that our impact effort needed to be more collective than ever, that relational organizing is very important in a time where you can go on the streets and the biggest relationships and communication you have is with your family and your immediate friends. And so that became the framework, the starting framework for Can You Hear Us, knowing that we wanted to contribute to decentralizing Greta's figure, which sometimes has been seen as polarizing and controversial. And this was not going to be a campaign about one person or just recognizing an individual effort, but rather opening the door to the frontline efforts of so many local organizations worldwide that are doing this work in the front line. So we started taking the baton from I Am Greta, knowing that we wanted to also contribute and collaborate with other films like Humanity Has Not Yet Failed, which is an animated short film reviewing the rise of the Fridays for Future movement, as well as
and I do want to ask
Unstoppable.
you about that separate film because that is a must-see by everybody. 7-minute animated short that really has such a strong message, but in a entertaining way. So
Exactly.
yeah. Maybe we could just go to that for a minute.
Yeah,
How did that come about?
Well, it came about thanks to Exposure Lab, who introduced us to Jared Scott, one of the creators of the wonderful short, which just got an Emmy nomination, which is spectacular. And we're so proud of that collaboration because at the end of the day, when we as impact producers work in an impact campaign, we didn't make the movie. We didn't make I Am Greta. We're not responsible for the producing choices that Cecilia and the wonderful team at Be Real Films made. So we get to have an opportunity to bring this film to an audience in context with other organizing efforts, other filmmaking efforts. And for example, something that we've realized, we just did a couple of screenings in Thailand, is that the educational film cut of I Am Greta, which is 30 minutes, with the 16 minutes of Humanity Has Not Yet Failed, as a double theater, which is 46 minutes, and then it gives more time for intergenerational conversation, for clips from Youth Unstoppable or The Educator's Kid. That becomes a much more impactful experience than kind of forcing to revolve the campaign activities around one cut of the film and being rigid with the organizing effort, which never.
That's brilliant. I'd like to bring Camilla in at this point because it's really interesting to me that you have these two different efforts and how do they work together? And Camilla, you're at the Can You Hear Us campaign. So what specifically are you doing and how do you work with Yay Impact?
Hi, Maggie. Thank you. Thank you for having us. I entered in the third extension, which is focused on Latinx communities and bringing the materials to Latinx communities. We have the upcoming midterms as a goal in our objective, and there's like many issues to see in here. On one side, we have seen that there's a lack of Spanish resources. Also, there's local organizations and a couple of big organizations, Latinx organizations, focused on climate issues, but the big ones and the most of them are focused strictly on migration. And people who make part of that probably join for a long time, and probably whenever they get their legal situation arranged, they go out. But climate change is not a core an objective for these organizations, knowing that they're willing to have a better future for following generations is the main goal for migrating in the first place. So that's our connection. So far, we have been updating the materials on one side to Spanish and also arranging them to make them a little bit more specific and extended on like our intergenerational guide on how to have these conversations in many ways. I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit about a bit more.
I did see on your website, and I thought this was great. You really single out three specific actions: increasing climate literacy, which is so important. And Greta emphasizes the need for science. We must listen to the scientists. Creating personalized action plans. And I thought that's absolutely spot on, because if we don't see it in our own backyard, it seems like it's over there somewhere, right? So when we start to see it in our own backyard and how it affects us and our family and our friends, we're much more, I mean, the research we've been doing around impact media, really illustrates this. We're much more motivated to try to do something. And then the third one, and this was interesting to me, having intergenerational conversations. Could you talk about that one?
Well, in first place, we all need to be active in this, right? It's an effort that everybody has to do, not in a personal way, which is also helpful, but mostly in a collective way, thinking of us as a super diverse group, which is already being affected by climate change, right? So our focus is intergenerational allyship, conversations and actions, because for so far what we have seen is that there's people organized on this side, there's the young people in here, the elders in another side, and also through our work we have noticed that there's a gap in the middle, which we think it's about the productive life part of people. There's a gap between the people who went out from university and the people who went out from their jobs because they are retired. So far, first of all, we don't want to think on intergenerational as the first image that comes to our mind, which is super young people and much more older people, but we have to engage the people in the middle also, which are the ones who are like somehow in the world where decisions are being made, right? So on one side, that's the reason why we encourage intergenerational conversations and action. So far, also what we have noticed is that the so-called intergenerational groups that we are working with, they are really wondering on how to engage with other generations. And it's it's really difficult because there's on one side young people wondering on how to reach and how to talk to their parents, grandparents, and relatives and older people than them, and on the other side there's older people trying to understand how to get young people into action and what young people is doing right now, but not actually having actions together.
Yeah.
What we have noticed also is whenever we talk about the importance of having this allyship is knowledge on one side, knowing on previous history on climate change or fights for racial justice, civil rights fights, and also a knowledge on what's going on right now with the climate crisis.
Yeah.
Knowledge on internet, media resources, different ways on doing stuff in a creative which also on one side knowledge of legal system, finances, which usually is not on focus on climate action and climate activity.
Much more intersectional than what you're
exactly, and having both knowledges, and also it's super important because we need all kind of knowledges to kind of continue into this.
Absolutely.
And I would love to just mention a couple of things on the intergenerational front, because we've made this the main focus of the campaign. We want intergenerational conversations to be the distinguishing element of why people come to Can You Hear Us and remember this impact campaign. And the reason why is because there is a lot of scientific evidence that shows that when you look at social movements, even within demographics that are the same collective between, like, for example, I'm queer myself, or I am Jewish. Like, if I look at my own Jewish family, my views on many different issues are very different than my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
But they might be the same views than the majority of young people, regardless of their religion or economic status. And that is a unifying political demographic factor that is even exacerbating the zip code in some instances where you live.
That's exactly right. And, we think about the polarization between different political groups, but this idea of being able to bring people together of different generations, to bring people together from different backgrounds is so critical to actually affecting and moving that social movement forward. I want to come to you, Samuel, about something that I think a lot of filmmakers are asking, and certainly the distributors. For many years, the demographics in terms of reaching audiences and defining and evaluating audiences was pretty much age and gender. And now we have this very fragmented, some would call a very messy media landscape. How do you actually reach the audiences that you want to reach? And, and how do you do that in a way that accomplishes exactly what you've both been talking about, and that is bringing people together?
The power of community. You got it. I mean, it's truly important to remind people that we're talking about the most devastating, mind-blowing issue of our time. It's like we're all coming together to talk about the potential mass extinction of this planet, and how we're not going to create a community that bonds and take care of each other in a holistic, healing way, if that's what we're coming together about. No? And so I think that impact campaigns have a responsibility in making sure that the connection with that film, especially me watching I Am Greta, and at this point I've seen it quite a few times, I realized that there were so many aspects about my own climate anxiety that I was not acknowledging, and I was not giving myself kindness, care for. And so through this campaign, through meeting partners, finding people in the front line that made this their primary focus, you realize how we can take care of each other and how we can show up for each other in meaningful, non-performative ways. Because so often, I'm 27 years old. This is the first impact campaign that I developed from beginning to not yet end, because I don't think campaigns should end. They should be regenerative and have a cumulative impact. And I hate it when it's about, okay, I'm going to put your logo on die,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
this
that's so
is,
important.
yeah,
I mean, that comes to another question. And Camilla, let's start with you because you've already extended the campaign in a way that it hasn't been before. And then I'd like to hear from you too on this, Samuel, because, so often a film is done and maybe it gets out there and it does the festival circuit and it has a certain amount of impact. And if it has strong partnerships with different organizations, they help get the film out there and generate that conversation and then it does just kind of right. So one of the things that I thought is really incredibly successful with your campaign is that you have found ways to keep growing it and not just growing it, but really expanding out into many different demographics and many different audiences. So Camilla, can you just talk to where do you see your campaign going? What is the future of your campaign, your specific campaign?
Well, yes, first of all, I agree. I could totally agree with you on the efforts of having a documentary done. Myself and Samuel have worked previously on documentaries like from very start, and knowing all that effort, at some point it's going to have some kind of an end, or probably not the kind of impact or little long impact that the effort needs or deserves somehow. It's kind of hard. On the first point, it also depends on the kind of documentary and product that you have done. I think Samuel can agree with me in the point that the lasting of our campaign, it's going to depend on the kind of community and the building bridging that we have been doing so far, even when we ourselves stop kind of working in the campaign. The impact that it has had in creating the relationships between different organizations all around the country and even further than the United States, it's going to be lasting for a very long time, if it's not having the name of Can You Hear Us campaign or I Am Greta documentary. Our impact, from my point of view, our principal impact is this building connections between different local organizations and also bringing individuals into action to get to know their local organizations. This brings me to product that we created, the local organizations map, which right now has more than 350 organizations. If you are willing to take action and you don't know where to start from, you can easily look for your area and see which are the issues, because usually we also live in our neighborhoods and we are really worried about climate change and we don't know where to start from. That's where our Take Action test it's really helpful also on your skills and what kind of action would you be taking. And also as Samuel was mentioning, it also gives a lot on hope on the fact that you're doing something, you are creating community, you are making part of something. And that's more.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That map, I love that map. Yeah.
And it gives you hope on to your point, Maggie, about the customizable action plan. No, we want to empower people to learn what are they best at, what do they care the most at, because we cannot assume or pretend that we are expected or capable of doing everything. That will be very self-centered and equivocal, most likely. So what are your skills? Where do you live? What's your capacity? Let's create a customized plan that works for you. And then we can start working with others as well, which is something that I'm very proud of. I'm very nerdy. I always say that my love language is metrics and indicators. Talk to me in KPIs. And I appreciate when I look at the Google Analytics of the website to see that we have a 6-minute average engagement time, which is very high for many websites. It means people are reading that old thing that young people don't seem to do much these days, no? And we also have more views on the Take Action page than the landing page. So more people are going to the website straight to the Take Action because our partners are using the Take Action page as a resource that they are amplifying as a standalone place to go, rather than you going to a screening and then visiting the landing page and then discovering the resources. That's why in many countries worldwide, when you type intergenerational conversations on Google, the first result that you might find in your Google search is the intergenerational conversation guide, which is something
Wow.
great.
Okay, let
because
me
it
just
means
stop for a second. I just have to
that's
say,
awesome.
wow, that is
Yeah.
congratulations. That is huge. That's huge.
That's real. That's internet real estate. It's like, you know, without
Wow.
you know, paying for the Google ad, and I think that is a great example of how, you know, I'm very obsessed with KPIs. I'm never gonna be able to know exactly how many conversations happened just because people had the guide, but you can have a measurement of how important those conversations are when immediately you see the lack of materials in this regard, and you see how easy it is to create something that has notoriety. And even people or media articles have quoted and sourced the guide alone instead of the campaign, just because there is not that many resources in that aspect. So now that we have expanded the campaign, we have realized, oh my God, there is such a connection between intergenerational trauma and Latinx communities and first generation migrants and second. And so expanding on those intersectionalities as a way of organically growing the conversation around the campaign is something very exciting.
I love this. I just do. I mean, it really, you're really at the front edge of a whole new way of bringing people together across generations. I want to ask you about this because I think it ties in. There's been a lot of discussion, and we've done a lot of research around gloom and doom, kind of that fear. I'll say fear mongering, but you know, that pushing the fear, which does push the urgency. It does make people kind of wake up and go, whoa, okay, there is an issue here. But it can also very much disempower people. In I Am Greta, and certainly in the animation, it comes out very strong with that kind of, you know, gloom and doom, fear, urgency, but ends on a note of hope. How do you balance those? How do you find the right balance between those?
I want to hear Camila start, but before I pass it to you, Camila, I want to mention that at year 2 of the campaign, we did an amazing study with UCLA Center for Scholars and Storytellers with Yalda Uls and her team. And one of the analyses that we did was we had several screenings and several speaking series, and we surveyed the attendees and asked them about their emotional reactions, and then separated all the answers by age groups. It mind blowed me when I saw the drastic differences in emotional responses among younger activists and younger attendees and older, and it surprised me because it was the opposite of what I expected. I expected that because younger activists who report higher levels of climate anxiety, they will be more willing to react to the doom and gloom, which is the opposite. They're more hopeful because they report a need for more hope, and they feel more mobilized and willing to do something with their life about it, versus older activists who see the decay and see how their own efforts, someone who has been celebrating Earth Day for 50 years, and hasn't now seen that many outcomes, is more willing to fall under the strategy of like, well, we gotta tell people how bad things are and will be, especially if you don't necessarily feel that you will live them personally, and you're acting out of protection for your grandchildren or for your future offspring. So it was very interesting because at the end of the day, just as we put together a customized action plan, we cannot expect everyone to have the same reaction to the climate crisis. And even in climate storytelling, it happened the same between people who like comedy versus people who like horror versus people who like documentary. And so we have to adapt and be flexible, and that's what community building look like. But Camila, how do you think that also applies to like
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you too,
Mm.
because this is fascinating. And I think the fact that you found out the opposite of what you thought you were going to find out, Samuel, is just exactly why we can't make the assumptions. We actually need to do some research around this. Camilla, please.
I can answer that through by the in the updating process of our intergenerational guide. There's this part that the idea came to me when I was listening many podcasts and reading some informations of Afrofuturism. I'm not an expert on that at all, I have to say. But so far, what has been coming to me and sticking to me and to my mind is the idea of thinking, or it's mostly what have been done with Afrofuturism. It's science fiction by many different authors like Octavia E. Butler. And the idea of it all is thinking on different futures, probably as if colonization and esclavization hadn't happened, or probably in different futures where Black people didn't go through it, or many different things happened, and we can think on different futures, having that at a not a starting point somehow, because it's like trying to erase that and think on how life would be if this hadn't happened. So in this exercise on how it could be if something hadn't happened, even if we know that had happened, and that gives us also information on what we want it to be somehow. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. This exercise of imagination brings us lots of many different ideas on what to do, what we should be doing. There's also this concept of radical imagination and trying to imagine, rather than the worst future that we can imagine, to trying to imagine the very best future that we could get. Yeah, it's also this concept on decolonizing the future, right? Also there's another author that I don't remember his name right now. He's thinking about even young people as an ancestors, and the fact that we are colonizing the future, even not matter who we are, where we're coming from. Evidently, there's many more people with much more power than normal people, and they are colonizing the future much more, but we are somehow making a determination on how life is going to be.
Yeah, you build it and they shall come, right? I mean, it is world, it's imagining a better world, and then thinking about how do we achieve that?
Exactly. And also thinking on, there's this part in our intergenerational guide, which is called creating alternative paths to the future. Probably having the conversation on what would I have done if I had lived in a different time era, or if there's an older person, what would I have done if I was when I was 20, if I knew we were going to end here, or which would have been my worries. So yeah, who would I be voting? Right. We cannot go back right now, but what we can do is think on an action and trying to bring it to our times. So we are creating an alternative future. Yeah. And a different future, and probably kind of stopping with the part on we have no more time. Evidently, we have little time. We have to act right now, but there's still time. There's still place for action, and thinking out of ourselves also, like in the future. If I was right now, like 50 years ahead, what would I be thinking on the options of what would I have done? And then it gives you different ideas on how to act. And this action also on seeing yourself, myself, I'm almost 30, but imagine myself probably as a grandmother, or not a grandmother, I don't want to be a mother, but probably on thinking of the future offspring of my relatives. It's like, okay, I have the responsibility to do something. And you mentioned that in our page, there's this appetite of science, 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 but also what we have been seeing through the updating of our intergenerational guide, it's that it's science somehow, and in a very, very bad way, has become a political tool that so far with fake news and many other strategies has been denied. So as humans, what we are also trying to do is bring in emotions on the table. And
yeah, head and heart, right? It's head and heart. You can't have
exactly.
one without the other. And
Exactly.
together with, especially in today's misinformation, you know, storm.
It's
I
huge.
was going to use another word, but I won't. But
Yeah.
it really, I mean, the amount of misinformation today really just makes it that much more important that people take the time to become informed, but then really understand. And I love this idea of the head and the heart, the science and the emotion, bringing it together to really motivate people. I know we're going to run out of time soon, but I really would love to hear from both of you. What advice do you have? And if it's, 1, 2, 3, or however, but what advice do you have? And Samuel, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Camilla. And then any last thoughts or things that I haven't asked you that you feel are super important to share? I would love to hear it.
Yeah, well, the biggest advice that I have that I've learned a lot through this campaign is the importance of not being ageist in the climate movement. I mean, being ageist has very harmful repercussions. It shuts down people. It's way worse than the doom and gloom or any other of those strategies that people talk about. And that's something that, we always need accountability in any social justice movement. And as an impact campaign, we've wanted to be accountable to partners that we were working with, including ourselves. And there were moments that we felt that, Greta's discourse was part of a discourse that wasn't recognizing the effort that had been made in the 70s and 80s. And you have the ozone layer that went down substantially thanks to the efforts of many organizations who have been working and might not be youth-led. And there is a lot of tragedy and suffering that have gone unacknowledged, and there is a lot of repair that needs to do for previous generations that have suffered most of that burden, just as much as we all know that younger generations will suffer more in the future too. So it's really important when we think of intersectionality to include age in the picture as well, just as we also want to include disability. I myself am hearing impaired. When I go into a Zoom meeting like this one without closed captions, I'm always like, okay, well, am I getting it right? Did I get this right? And every person shows up to the room the best they can, and we gotta help them. We gotta support each other. We gotta create that circle of trust with respect, love, and mutual aid. And that's, as impact producers, the bigger responsibility we have to make, like Camila was saying earlier, to make ourselves unnecessary when we bring partners together and we equip them with resources that are going to outlive us, just like the guide or the customized plan or anything out there like the map, and to support organizations that will remain and that need to be uplifted long term, not just during the distribution of your film.
Yeah. So important. Thank you. That was so important. And thank you so much for sharing that. And Camilla, you have the last word.
From my point of view, also adding and supporting 100% what Samuel has just mentioned on bringing everybody into action and taking all of the skills into action is super important. From my point of view, I would give 2 advices. Organizing should be one of them. Probably not all the people, and we also have to acknowledge that, have the time to do so because of different responsibilities, but try to organize and try to at least get to know on what's going on in your neighborhood, in your area. It's super important, and whenever it's also about intersectionalism for right now Latinx communities, but any migrant community, or different communities, to bring and raise a sense of belonging. We all, I myself, I'm a migrant in Spain, and that's where I met Samuel many years ago. And this sense of belonging, it's super important. And whenever you are aware and acting on the issues that are affecting the territory you are living in, it gives you another way of living, without never forgetting on which are the issues in that area that are affecting you as a migrant, probably.
And I will
also,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, that to that sense of belonging, just because you brought up that we met in Spain, and so like, and the accountability that I was mentioning earlier, it's okay to lean into uncomfortable conversations a lot of times. Like Camila and I doing the guide about intergenerational conversations, updating the educator resources, like I realized myself, oh my God, we're not tackling decolonization enough. We're not like going to the root of many of these problems, and it's a lot of times when you put yourself in the situation of confronting your own views and the one that you haven't been exposed to, that you realize, oh, those are my shortcomings. These are the things that I don't know, that I'm illiterate about. So I commend this third extension for bringing more perspective on that issue, because colonization and climate action, they go hand in hand. And quite often we don't have time to tackle the issue. We run out of time, but it is an important link that for sure, it's important to deconstruct and be.
And as a second and last advice, it would be having a conversation. Try to have the conversation with everybody. We have been observers in in a couple of focus groups, and young people are asked, have you had this conversation with your family? And it's like, I know it's important for them, but we haven't really had the conversation. If they are really worried, if they're doing something, probably they have it and they know that their parents are probably in a group already organized. So have the conversation with anybody that crossed in your path, and just get to think on different ideas and perspectives. That's my advice.
Thank you. Great advice, both of you. This has been such an incredible pleasure. I really, wow, what a deep conversation for a Monday particularly. But seriously, thank you so much. This has been an incredible conversation, very enlightening, very informative. It's been a great pleasure, and congratulations again on your Can You Hear Us campaign, and you're being selected by the special jury for the Jackson Wild 2022. And if people would like to know more about the research that we are doing at the Center for Environmental Filmmaking, just go to cefimpactmedia.org, cefimpactmedia.org, because these are exactly the kinds of issues and discussion that we're trying to generate. And I look forward to being able to put your case study both on the Jackson Wild website and on our CEF Impact Media website. Thank you very much. This was fantastic.
Thanks a lot for having us, Maggie.